Welcome to the Festival
of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my virtual booth here at the Festival of Storytellers, and thank you, Reader's Magnet, for providing this opportunity to spread the word about my work. My name is Carl Brush. I write historical fiction. When I say historical, a lot of people might assume that I'm going to give you a review of textbooks or something like that, but no. The novels that I write are full of romance, they're full of adventure, and they're full of social and racial issues that are just as current today. I mean, 100 years ago as they are today. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of the novels. I brought 6 novels here to the festival, and then to be talking in depth about one of them. So let's just dive right into the whole situation. First of all, we have the Maxwell Vendetta. It's one of a trilogy about the Maxwell family. Maxwell family lived in Northern California, in the foot of the Sierra Nevada, where most of my books are set, somewhere between the Sierra Nevada and San Francisco. My great-grandparents came across the plains, did the covered wagon thing in 1864, and they settled in a little valley north of what became known as the San Francisco Bay Area. And many of our family stayed right around here in that same general area. And most of my books are set there. I like it here. I love it here. I travel a lot and I've been to a lot of places, but I always come back to this place where I never thought of living somewhere else, even though I've seen a lot of other things. So the Maxwell Vendetta, as its name implies, is about this Maxwell family and about somebody who is on the warpath against them and wants to wipe out the whole family. So that continues on to the second vendetta. I have a hard time getting rid of this villain, and it takes 2 books to do it. And boy, I'm telling you, the adventure is very, very thick in both of these books, and it'll keep you absorbed, keep you moving and moving and moving until the end, and then you'll wish there were more. Finally, and this is the third in the trilogy. Third in the trilogy. The Swindle in Sawtooth Valley. We kind of finally get rid of that bad guy, but the Maxwells are a rich and powerful family, and so there are a lot of people around who would like to have what they have and want to take it away from them. So they switch actually in this story from a lot of the strong arm tactics that they did in the first 2 books, and turn to more subtle, what you might call white collar crime with swindles and fraud and that kind of stuff. So that is the third one. It's not, it's not quite in book form yet. It's coming out next month, but this is the cover. And the lovely couple there is a couple that has been moving along for a couple of novels, and we have to figure out what's going to happen with them. It takes quite a while for their romance to blossom, and how they do it and what they do is part of a really interesting story. Third, this is a book that does not take place in California. As the subtitle shows, you probably can't read it, a novel of the Texas Revolution. So we go from California to Texas, not because I lived or anything in Texas, but I met a guy online, became a friend. We became friends, and he was from San Antonio and wanted, which is where the Alamo is, I'm sure most of you know that, and wanted to collaborate with me on this story of the Yellow Rose, the Yellow Rose being a real flesh and blood woman, which I didn't know. She was involved with Sam Houston in the Texas Revolution. And I said, Sam, hey, why are you calling me? I'm from California. I know almost nothing about the Texas Revolution. And he said, well, I like your writing, so I would like us to get together. And so we did, and this is the result. And I highly recommend this. I'm highly recommending everything that I wrote, of course. So finally, get to Bonita, which is the one that I'm going to be talking extensively about today. Bonita is, a heroine who is audacious. She's smart. She's aggressive, and her attitudes, especially in 1842, when this begins, when she is about 12 years old, gets her in trouble, especially in the days where women were supposed to be more submissive, to stay in the background and to let the men handle everything. She's not really very sympathetic with that attitude. So those are the books we're going to be talking about today, except for the sequel to Bonita called You Can't Keep Her. And I'll just go ahead and say right now that the title comes from the fact that during all her troubles in the first book, Bonita has a daughter. The daughter is stolen from her as an infant, and she spends 6 years trying to find this daughter. She finally does. She's being raised, that daughter is, by another family, and Bonita decides she's going to leave the girl with that family rather than tear her away. But things happen, and she decides that there's that girl needs to live with her. So the title says, "You Can't Keep Her," and that's a message to the other family, and the adventure goes on from there. So let's start with Bonita. When we enter the story, she's a 12-year-old, and she lives on a expansive ranch called Rancho Sausalito, across the bay from San Francisco, when San Francisco was called Yerba Buena, and it was Mexican territory. It was not part of the U.S. at that point. Her uncle, and she thinks he's her uncle, is an Englishman who jumped ship when his boat came to San Francisco, and married into a prominent family, and was given a land grant in Rancho Sausalito. Those of you who know the Bay Area a little bit know that Sausalito has turned into a very trendy little village, no longer a little outpost fishing village, but it's a real tourist destination. But that's not the way things are in 1842 when we enter the book. And so I like to start my stories off what they call in media res, which means in the middle of things. And so Bonita is indeed jumping right into the middle of trouble right from the beginning. The novel takes the form really of a diary, or you could say a letter. That daughter that I mentioned earlier, she hasn't seen, and so she decides to write a letter so that when she does find her, she's very positive she'll be able to show her what her life was like during those years that she missed. Chapter 1 is called Roping Grizzlies. My night of the grizzlies. I believe, my daughter, that this is as good a place as any to begin telling my story. Perhaps these pages will never find you, but whether you ever read them, whether we ever embrace on this side of heaven, you live always in my heart. As I write, I imagine you at my side on that moonlit night more than 6 years past. They insisted over and over that a 12-year-old white girl had no business out lassoing bears. They tried to stop me, like they always had, but I refused to accept the refusals. It's the way I am, Mija, and the way you are, I'm sure. So Mija is Spanish for my daughter. So there I was, riding Pintado bareback, following Luis and Salvador and 3 other vaqueros to Arroyo Calaveras, where we dump what's left of Rancho Sausalito's cattle after they sell the hides and tallow, and after we of the household have consumed what meat we can. The moon was bright, so I was careful to stay in the shadows of the oak trees and the chaparral. I didn't intend to participate this first time, but I hungered at least to experience the feel and the smells and the sounds of it all. A few miles out, Luis held up his hand, a signal for everyone to rein in and dismount. I followed suit. I knew from listening to their stories what would happen next. They'd leave the horses and creep the last 100 yards or so to the bank of the wash. They'd count how many bears were feeding, where they were concentrated, then plot their attack. They'd isolate a single animal, throw 3 or 4 loops around him, and haul him back to the special corral at the ranch where he'd be staked out to fight a bull on Saturday. After the fight, his paws would become a tasty dish, his skin a rug, or maybe chaps with claws draped over the instep of someone's fancy boots. I kept a slight rise between myself and the men, sneaked toward the edge of the dry creek bed. I could smell the rotten meat and could hear the bears growling and snuffling. I inched forward on my stomach, wary of spoiling things for the vaqueros and hurting my chances of joining them someday. I crept to the rim, peered over. Grizzlies are pretty much gone around here now, Mija, but you didn't grow up around San Francisco Bay in the 1830s and early 40s without seeing them. Still, I'd never been this close, not in the wild. Other times you'd glimpse them in the distance as they roamed free, or when the vaqueros dragged them in, clawing and biting at the lariats that bound them, or when they fought a bull during one of those bloody, roaring battles to the death. I counted 5. A pair of sows and their yearling cubs. That the adults foraged among the bones for the tastiest remains. 2 of the cubs fought a tug-of-war over a skull, growling and squealing like puppies. Finally, one of them ripped off the jawbone and rocked away in triumph, headed straight toward me. It had never occurred to me that bears would play like this. I suddenly regretted what would happen when the vaqueros moved in, thought perhaps it would be better to go back than to see the animal imprisoned. That's when Luis and his compañeros spurred their mounts into action, leaped like the very shades of the devil from the shadows of an outcropping, howling like coyotes. Hooves shook the earth, lariats whipped the air, the ground where I lay crumbled beneath me and sent me tumbling into the arroyo. I dropped a few feet onto a jutting rock, which knocked the breath out of me. I continued to roll catawampus, I don't know how far, until I fetched up against a soft, wiry-haired mound of live bear. The cub, no baby from up close, let out a yip and leaped sideways. We stared at one another for a long moment. I should have been terrified, I suppose, but I don't recall feeling much of anything. My emotions were as paralyzed as my body. That stillness didn't last long. The cub snapped out of his surprise, swiped at me with his forepaw, then bounded off. The swat probably wouldn't have looked like much if you'd been watching from up top, but it knocked me 6 ways from Sunday and delivered the most intense pain I'd ever endured. I somehow found enough breath to yell, scream, or make some kind of sound because the hoofbeat suddenly stopped. I heard Luis yelling, "¿Quién es? ¿Qué pasó?" "It's Bonnie," I cried. "Bonita." The rumbling hoofbeats and yelling and growling resumed as the vaqueros distracted the other grizzlies. They held them at bay so Luis could tend to me. He knelt beside me, spoke in a tone that was both angry and concerned. "What are you doing here, Bonita? You hurt?" I had no explanation for the first question, so I answered the second. "Estoy bien," I said. But of course, I was not in the least all right. It's not long after this encounter that Bonita, who is always trying to get in the middle of things just as much as she was trying to get involved with the grizzlies, indulges in a little eavesdropping. And when she does, she finds out a family secret. She's always been told that her parents died in a shipwreck, and so that's why she was living with Samuel with Richardson's, with the Richardson family, because her parents were gone and they wanted to take care of their needs. Okay, Fairgore 1726 says, who is your inspiration for Benita? I would say Benita is kind of a composite of, strong and audacious women that have been part of my life. My mother, my wife, somehow or another, the whole attitude got passed on to a lot of my stepchildren. So I had a lot of good models, and I can't say that any single one of them, was the main inspiration. But I had a lot of models, as I said, to look to. So I drew on all of them from time to time. Thanks for that question. I enjoyed Benita herself so much that writing about her was like bringing her out to the world, where she and all the other women that I've known who are in that category, that's where they belong, is out where everybody can see and admire them. At any rate, what she finds out in her eavesdropping is that she is not a niece of the man she supposed was her uncle at all. She finds out that instead of dying in a shipwreck, that her parents were gunned down while they were supposedly rustling horses from Rancho Sausalito, and that in the process of that thievery, they were killed. So they didn't want to tell Benita that her parents were criminals, so they kept it a secret, and then she finds out. True to her attitude, she gets extremely angry. She thinks she's been cheated of who her true self is, and she doesn't believe that her parents are criminals, and she throws a fit, and they tell her that she's just going to have to get over it. So she gets some provisions together, jumps on a horse, and rides out to see what she can do to prove that the whole thing is a lie. And so in the course of that search, she undergoes a whole number of trials. She is captured by some enemies of the Richardsons, and she ends up getting raped, bearing a child who was stolen from her shortly after birth, and she for a while is a piano player in a brothel. So she undergoes a great many different aspects of a life she never even imagined before. So during the course of all that conflict, she's injured and she's walking with a limp. So she's in fairly bad shape. Because she's so difficult to handle, instead of taking her back to Rancho Sausalito, they decide that she would be well cared for if she went over to the ranch of Mariano Vallejo. Some of you know that Vallejo is the name of a city here near the Bay Area, and that he was one of the a Mexican landowner of great repute when Bonita goes to live on his ranch. In order to, he agrees to go ahead and see what he can do to care for her. she limps around. She gets a lot of her piano skills from there, and then then the whole business of the conflict between the United States and Mexico. Mexico gets going, and then there was an event called the Bear Republic. And that meant basically that there were a group who wanted to take California and whatever other parts of the country they could away from the Mexicans and set up their own country so that the Mexicans wouldn't be able to dominate it anymore. They'd have some land. And so I'll interrupt that to do the Fairgoer 1727, asking, what do you want readers to take away from reading the entire saga? Excuse me. What do I want? I want the readers to feel a lot of compassion for a lot of the people that are characters that are in this book, and I want to feel admiration. And because of the fact, as I said earlier, that the social and historical issues that are part of this, part of these three novels, are so relevant to today's situations with racial conflict and women's rights and all those different things that we every day either read about in the paper or grew up knowing about and want to change. That there are ways to deal with them, and so I would like them to feel compassion for the folks that go through all this in the 1840s and 50s, where this is set, as well as for the people who are going through similar situations today, because, of course, since they're human situations, we have to take those things on for ourselves. Excuse me. So maybe we can develop some attitudes and strategies that'll help us get through our stuff today. This chapter is called The Bear Republic. June was sunny that year. The plaza in Sonoma shone with multitudinous shades of green and gold. The mission garden stood resplendent with corn and squash and flax. Orchards were passing out of blossom and moving toward fruit. The flowering abundance promised a cornucopia of pears and peaches and apples and almonds in the fall. Simply to walk to and from daily Mass was to find infinite proof, not only of God's existence, but of his beauty and mercy as well. Who but a merciful Father would bestow such miracles? And then in come the folks from the Bear Rebellion. We took them for vaqueros at first, did we women of the house? Yet vaqueros would never be so boisterous, hooting and yelling on the Sabbath so close to town. We became curious and a little afraid. Soon we became very afraid. There are dozens of them, a ragtag bunch of Anglos, dirty and sweaty, waving whips. They fired pistols and rifles in the air. They leaped from their horses and began giving orders using vile language I won't repeat here. You Mex women, in the house, now. I was one of the few who could understand their words, but they made their intentions clear to all. We began to crowd toward the house when Gilberto came from somewhere and foolishly stepped between them and us. No, senores, He said, and those who were his last words, for they gunned him down where he stood. You think we don't mean business? Said the one whose gun was still smoking. He was one of the few clean-shaven ones among them, but he lacked a great many teeth and part of one nostril. Now get! So get we did. They packed us into the kitchen and living room with 2 guards at each doorway. Outside, we heard a great deal of shooting, yelling, whooping, but we couldn't tell what was happening or why. Daylight passed into darkness, and more men entered the house. We heard pounding and splintering. Then we saw flames, glowing and flickering in the darkness. Next morning, I go by the name of William Ide, one of them says, but that ain't important. What's important is this, so listen good. I know some of you know English just fine, so you can tell the others what I said. Me and my men, we come to claim this land in the name of the United States of America. You are no longer Mexicans. A voice came from behind us. But they sure as hell ain't Americans, are they, Bill? Raucous laughter scattered through the American crowd. Hardly that. No, Ide said. You ain't nothing right now. The American government's paperwork ain't properly caught up with us yet, so until it does, we're giving this place our own name, and here's our flag. One of the men drew on the pulley rope, and up went one of the most grotesque sights I've ever seen. A bed sheet with an outline of what looked like a brown pig cut from a saddle blanket and sewn on. A crude red painting of a star, and the words California Republic completed the banner. Behold the emblem of the bare republic, he said. You are free of despotism from this point forward. The greedy caretakers of this and every other mission are relieved of their duties. Their spoils have been turned over to our government for the sake of the people. So that's the beginning of the bear flag, which to this day is the California flag. And I kind of drew on a little collection of diaries that I found, and that impression of the bear looking like a pig I drew straight from the accounts of one of the women in the Vallejo household. Just so you know that this is not all conflict. Want to go to Want to go toward the end of the book when Benita finds some love and romance. Carter Maxwell has spent a few weeks actually exploring places in the Sierra Nevada for a place to build the ranch that he has envisioned, the place where he wants to build a little empire and do some frontier kind of living as well as civilized part of the world. Carter and I spent 2 days on ferries negotiating our way toward the mountains we could see rising far off, white crowns seemingly all the way to paradise. And when they arrive at Sawtooth Valley, those peaks standing at the beginning of the valley, Carter takes a stick and says, right here. He traced in the dust with a long stick while he talked. This will be the living room, a fireplace, of course, but not just a regular one. It'll be big enough so I can walk into it and stand up straight. Everything will be big like that. Stairways will lead up to each side of the bedrooms above, 6 of them, so there's plenty of room to entertain. Here, the office. the kitchen. We'll build right here. It'll take a big one to prepare meals for all the hands and the guests. Outside, there'll be a veranda all around. Carter, Carter! I wrapped my arms around him and silenced him with a kiss. Yes, mija, a kiss. Are you surprised after reading no hint of romance in all these pages? It was a kiss I wanted to last forever, just as I wanted all our kisses to last forever. And finally, kind of running out of time here, but I don't want to hurry too much. This You Can't Keep Her that I talked about earlier. Benita, in her search to clear her parents' reputation for reasons I won't go into right now, travels from San Francisco to New Orleans, and then she returns, trying very hard to clear her parents' name and build a reputation that will allow her to keep her daughter even if somebody else wants to take him away, ruling that the courts will make her a fit parent. That's her goal. In the course of all that, she and the gentleman who has been like an uncle to her, really, or an older brother, has been one of the foremen in Rancho Sausalito, goes with them to help out on the search. And they start having some feelings for each other. I was in my gown, my hand on the counterpane, when a surge of emotion, a mix of fear and joy, impelled me downstairs. Luis stood when I entered the parlor. Monita, he said, Monita being a word meaning little monkey and his pet name for Benita. I stepped past him and sat at one end of the couch with my bare feet tucked under me. He sat at the other end, looking alternately at me, staring straight ahead. Finally, he spoke. Kat, who is another man who went with them to New Orleans, is very attracted to you. So the romantic conflict was out between us. Luis had more courage than I to bring it up, and I still was too cowardly to delve into it. He's a fine man who's done much for us, saved our lives. Yes, Luis said, we owe him a great deal. He waited a couple of uncomfortable beats before continuing. You deserve more than me, a man so much older. Don't say that. A brown man with a white woman, they would never accept us. Who wouldn't? The judges, for one, would not. They are to allow judges, for one, if they are to allow Benita, being her daughter's name also, to join you. And if there were no judges, but there are. Love sought is good, but given unsought is better. What, he said? It's Shakespeare from one of his plays. You could say I sought love with Carter Maxwell, and it was wonderful, but he is gone. It endures only in memory, which, sweet as it is unsubstantial and unsatisfactory. So that gives you a taste of who Benita is and what these books are, or what the stories are like. Right way up. I did the wrong thing. I'm sorry. So this is Bonita and its sequel, You Can't Keep Her. Heard a fair amount of that one today. And going back to review, we have The Yellow Rose, a novel of the Texas Revolution. We have The Maxwell Vendetta. We have The Second Vendetta, and we have Swindle in Sawtooth Valley. So all 6 of these are available from Amazon. You're welcome to pick any or all of them up and treat yourself to wonderful tales of adventure and romance. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you enjoy the books. So long.